All right. Hello, and thank you for coming out. I'm JT Scott, Ward 2 City Councilor. I'm happy to welcome you to the Ward 2 ResiStat meeting. These are the meetings we have twice a year, hosted by the mayor and the communications department to give updates, and really a chance for the folks in the neighborhood to interact directly with the mayor and the heads of the different departments who are working on the issues that directly impact quality of life here in Ward 2. Also want to thank, I see our new school committee member, Alana Krepchin here. There you go. Congratulations, Alana. And several of my at-large colleagues. I think I saw Councilor Mba. Councilor Mba? Wait, there you are. There you are. Thank you. Councilor White, I think I saw come in. Councilor, there you are. Is there anybody else I'm missing? All right. Well, and of course the mayor and a whole staff that he'll be introducing. This has been a really challenging year. 2019 has been an enormously challenging year in Ward 2. We are absolutely bracketed by the Union Square construction, the Somerville Ave streetscape. It's an important project for our long-term health and ability to not be underwater. It's an important stormwater mitigation project, but it's also causing some serious traffic congestion and serious problems getting through Union Square. At the other end, we've got Beacon Street, which has limped into what is hopefully its final year. I'm hoping we'll get a few more updates on that tonight. I know it's something that I get updated on pretty much every other day when somebody on Beacon Street calls me and tells me what the heck's going on. But also from our engineering team who is trying to get that project to conclusion. And in between there, the problems we've been seeing, while crime has actually gotten a lot better in the neighborhoods, the flooding has been extraordinary through a combination of drainage problems and climate change. And we've had over 10 serious storm events that have caused major flooding in the Perry Park area, Kingman Road, Lake Street, and I know that some of that's going to get addressed tonight. I also know there's going to be another meeting being held specifically about flooding here on October 15th, and I'm sure you'll get some more details on that tonight. At the same time, we're also seeing rat problem hitting an epidemic level, and so that's why I'm glad that Ms. Silvera is here. Is Ms. Silvera here? Okay, Ms. Silvera is here from the city to give an update on a first look program, getting their hands around the whole rat epidemic, for lack of a better word. And I also want to encourage you that when you do have rat problems in your neighborhood, to give us a call. We have really put emphasis on this year, and we're seeing a lot more enforcement and a lot more assistance with the city being able to come out and help bait your property to work on getting the rats down. Thank you to Councilor Hirsch at large for joining us. So these are major problems. I'm happy that we're going to get some updates on them tonight. And then finally, I think there's also going to be some conversation, speaking of climate change and the real hazards of it. Hopefully an update on Conway Park and when we'll start to get to reclaim some of these surfaces that are so important for recreation. So with that, I'm very happy to welcome the mayor and Taylor Coe. Thank you for putting this together. Is the mayor coming up next? Oh. All right, I'll just introduce Taylor Coe, though. Thank you for coming out. If you have any questions, I'm easy to find. I've got the blue hair. Please, find me anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Scott. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to introduce our translators here tonight. If you do need translation, we have it available in Spanish, Haitian Creole, as well as Portuguese.
My name is Irma Flores. I'm the Spanish interpreter. If you need interpretation, please let me know. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Irma Flores y estoy aquí para ayudar con la interpretación en español. Si necesita interpretación, por favor, déjeme saber. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Anna. I'm here to do all the Portuguese translations. Olá, meu nome é Ana. Estou aqui para fazer traduções em português. Sou bem vestida, gente.
Good evening, my name is Devi, I'm the Asian Creole translator. Est-ce que si vous avez un qui parle créole, moi je suis capable de jouer ma traduction.
Thank you. So my name is Taylor Coe. I'm the ResiStat coordinator. For those of you who are new to ResiStat, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. ResiStat is a great way to just get an overview of what's going on in the city as well as in your ward, and we also have you tonight. So diving right in, we have a full agenda tonight. There are printouts of the slides, and we have lots of staff here as well as the mayor to talk about a lot of different topics. We won't be doing a very deep dive into any specific topic, but we do hope to take your questions, and we will go from there. So diving right into quick updates, Summer Baby is a great program that's offered by the city. It's sponsored by the Somerville Learning Collaborative, as well as Somerville's Health and Human Resources, or Human Health and, what is it? Yeah, Health and Human Services. So this program is available for newborns all the way up to 1 year old, and it's a way to just connect families with resources and support. People who join this program will receive a welcome baby bag, which just has a number of gifts as well as resources. And this is also a universal free multilingual home visiting program. So we do have home visitors available that can help you make valuable connections and just get you off on a really great start. So there's various contact info here. If you are interested in finding out more, there's also a website on this slide. These slides will be posted online on the ResiStat page on the Somerville website. If your child is a little bit older, or if you are interested in prenatal related classes, we do have other support and programs related to this. So this is just a little bit more info. If you are interested, the slides will be on the website. So our lead service line replacement program, this program recently got new funding. A lot of our pipes tend to be on the older side. The goal of this program is to make sure that all non-copper lines are replaced. To see if your residence has a water service line made of lead, you can visit the website somervillema.gov/lead services to check. If it does turn out that you have a service line made of lead, you can have your property's lead or non-copper water service line replaced free of charge. To be considered for replacement starting in the spring of 2020, the applications will be due by December 2019, but this is a rolling application process. For more information, feel free to go to the website or contact the engineering department, extension 5400. So rethinking our reusable and recyclable materials. Many of you at home probably use our zero sort recycling cart. So that just means all sorts of materials can kind of be mixed in there. We often see recycling in the news a lot these days, and thinking about climate change and how do we recycle responsibly. So the Office of Sustainability and Environment have been encouraging us to think about contamination, and this is kind of a two-pronged thought process. So with our zero sort bin, you might just be throwing away anything that seems like if you can rip it, you can recycle it, maybe just recycling as much as possible, but we want to think about contamination of, if there are materials that go into the recycling bin that cannot be recycled, it really can slow down the process and drive costs up. Some things that you can recycle include clean metal, glass, rigid plastic, and paper containers, as well as clean paper and cardboard. So the other type of contamination would be if there are food particles. So for instance, if you have a pizza box and there was just a little bit of cheese in there and you think, oh, maybe I can just throw it away, sometimes that can really slow down the process. If you are ever unsure if you should recycle something, we do have a really great tool called the Waste Wizard. You can go online at somervillema.gov/wizard to double check. Some things that you cannot recycle that might not seem that intuitive include plastic bags, plastic wrap, or film. Although some plastic materials are recyclable, plastic bags and plastic wrap can often get stuck in the machines that help us sort out our zero cart waste. All right, so a reminder to register to vote for the November 5th, 2019 city election. You can register to vote 3 ways, so either online, through the mail, or in person at the elections department. The deadline is coming up this month on Wednesday, October 16th by 8 p.m. For more information on this, somervillema.gov/elections. So Lincoln Park, most of you probably noticed it on your way in. We recently opened the fields back up again in August. We're continuing to improve the greenery around the area, and then our parks team as well as DPW are consistently working together to just maintain the plant bedding as well as the irrigation systems. we are in the final stages of design. We will be going to City Council for funding, and there is an upcoming meeting for this if you are interested in this topic, later this month on the 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Brick Bottom Gallery. For more information on this project or any kind of background on it, there is information on the website, somervillema.gov/artfarm. So the Allen Street Playground, earlier in the summer, the design was completed and we did put it out to bid. The prices came back very high, so we decided to rebid the project in late August. We'll be choosing a contractor that meets the city budget, and we are aiming for completion next year in the summer. So Beacon Street reconstruction. As of now, the paving is complete on the main roadway. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be doing, the Mass DOT contractors will be doing work that includes, but is not limited to, roadway striping, bright green surface treatment for bike lanes, isolated sidewalk repair, and a punch list as well. For any more information on this, somervillema.gov/Beacon Street. This work and the timing of it is really dependent on crew availability as well as weather. So the Green Line extension updates, as many of you know, to make this project possible, there is a lot of work going on in the city. The project is on schedule to be open by the end of 2021. Bridge closure updates include, so the Broadway Bridge is on track to reopen in March of next year. The Washington Street Bridge is now expected to be closed throughout the winter, but will reopen in April of 2020 instead of fall 2020. We're expecting an announcement from Mass DOT in the next few days or so. For the Medford Street Bridge, it will reopen in late spring of 2020, and then the School Street Bridge is expected to close in early spring of next year. Our next public meeting will be in November of 2019. More information about that meeting will be on the city website. We do understand that it is a really challenging time. We're very excited to see the completion of this project, and we do have a interdepartmental team dedicated to helping us remain vigilant about traffic management. So members of this team that work with our state partners include fire, police, mobility, engineering, traffic and parking, communications, as well as other staff. We do use a three-pronged approach, and we have seen success with various efforts, including our Review Your Commute campaign with the GLX team. We sent various communications materials out to 96 neighboring cities and towns, 84 media outlets, 29 medical facilities, 26 colleges, as well as large employers in the area. We do really appreciate the community's help with this program or with the construction, and we do understand the frustration. If you do have concerns, we encourage you to continue reporting it either through 311 or emailing us at construction@somervillema.gov. There are multiple ways to stay informed about this type of project as well as construction in the Somerville area. The Mass DOT GLX updates are posted regularly on the website mass.gov/GLX. We have a number of construction resources, including a construction newsletter and a website. And then we also have city alerts. If you are not signed up, we do encourage you to subscribe, as well as a city newsletter, which just kind of gives you an overview of what's happening in the city. So I'm going to hand it off to Chief Green. He's going to talk a little bit about response times as well as career opportunities in the fire department.
Good evening, Charlie Green, Fire Chief, here to talk about response times during the construction and also about a career open house that we'll be having in November. As Taylor pointed out, those dates on the screen for the opening of the bridges, believe me, nobody is looking forward to those dates than myself. It's been very stressful for the fire department during these bridge closures, and I also have to listen to my wife on a constant basis, trying to navigate my daughter up to the high school from West Somerville. And it'll be a pleasure when I don't have to hear her cursing me in the mornings as she's sitting in traffic. So I'd like to concentrate tonight on the past 6 months, from April through September, when the Ball Square Bridge, the Washington Street Bridge, the Medford Street Bridge closed, and Union Square basically got completely dug up. Before that all started, the fire department started planning how are we going to handle getting around the city and responding properly. with all this detours. And what we did was, we modified, we sat down, looked at the detours, decided how we could modify response plans and response areas, and we also made agreements with Cambridge and Boston for the east section of the city to assist us with any response delays. We also placed an extra piece of apparatus Monday through Friday from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. It's down on New Washington Street, and it handles any responses beyond the Washington Street Bridge. Because one of the issues we were afraid of is that we have no firehouses beyond the Washington Street Bridge. And that piece of apparatus down there has proved to be invaluable to us. So as this slide will show, our emergency response time citywide for the past 6 months, despite the 3 bridges closed, despite Union Square having been shut down partially, 3 seconds faster than the same time last year, and faster than the 3 previous years before that, when all the bridges were open. So it validates that our plans worked and are working, and I can't give enough credit to the men and women of the fire department who have to deal with it every day, have to drive the apparatus around the streets, and they're doing an incredible job. Also, I'd like to credit, we have great interdepartmental cooperation. I'm constantly monitoring response times. Every morning, I get a report for the past 24 hours. Any excessive response times, we investigate why, and we make corrections if they need it. If we have to change where the response is going to come from, we look at that, and we take that measure. Also, I'm on the phone constantly, meeting with Jesse, with Dan, with Rich Rage, with Brad Rawson, and with the police department. I have traffic cameras in my office. I'm looking at them every morning. We're talking with the company offices to try to find out what's going on out there. And these guys have been incredible to work with, and they've helped this plan work. And as you can see, there's the proof that it is working. Another thing I'd like to talk about is we are having a career open house at fire headquarters on November 16th from 10 to 12. And what we've seen the last couple of years is that the number of people taking the fire exam is dropping. And it's concerning to us. Obviously, the less people that take the exam, the less diversity that we have of candidates to choose from for the job. So we really want to emphasize that there's an exam coming up in April of 2020. If you know anyone that's going to be 19 in April of 2020 or older, we'd encourage them, if they're interested, to come to our open house at fire headquarters. If they can't make the open house, they can call the personnel department. We're working very closely with Jennifer Mancia at extension 3300. And we're also working closely with personnel to visit a lot of community organizations in the city, church organizations, to try to make sure that we have diversity candidates taking the exam. We recently filmed a segment for cable television. I had members of the department that speak Portuguese, that speak Spanish, that speak French, Creole, and we did a segment to try to get diverse candidates, to notify them of the job, to have them come to the open house, and to hopefully take the test. So thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will pass it off to Mayor Curtatone. And I'll be here afterwards. If anybody has any fire-related questions, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief. He's being kind. They weren't cursing you on the way to school, they were cursing me. So just be honest. Well, thank you. Welcome to Ward 2 ResiStat. I want to thank your counselors, especially Ward 2 Counselor J.T. Scott, helping us host tonight. I want to thank you, as has already been mentioned, for your patience, your flexibility, given the many consequential disruptions from the necessary work we have to conduct in the city, especially infrastructure, which I know we all know will have long-term benefits and it will, but getting there is kind of rough. The good news is it's going to get better soon. Over the next several months, bridges will open up, things will breathe easier. 2 years from now, the Green Line will be in full operation. That will take 25,000 cars per day off the road. The high school will be done less than a year from now. Kids will be going to a new Somerville High, and many of our other major infrastructure projects and parks and libraries will be completed. But it's really everybody's contribution to the community. The tax dollars, your advocacy, and most of all, your patience. So we apologize for the inconvenience, and but we thank you for your understanding. So I'm going to take you from the operational side, extend the service a little bit, connect some of the decisions we make around mobility, but really focus on a segment of our economy and provide some information and data on how we're thinking about our small business economy, really the importance. We talked about a lot within the community about the importance of our local economy, whether it's for obviously job creation or providing revenues to help us support the services we need to enhance our quality of life. But we really discussed what the city is doing to ensure that the economy is thriving. So tonight I really want to speak to you about the many ways behind the scenes that we're working across departments, some of them here, to help our alternative economies and small business adapt and really thrive amid a range and a myriad of challenges that they're facing as well. We are really fortunate in Somerville, and we're proud to have such an interesting and diverse local economy. Before I go into this, anybody here own their own small business or great, whether at home, in a storefront, as part of a co-working space or an employee one, this will strike a chord with you. But we don't just have typical businesses and chains, and some of also probably we have many independent, small, and typical and micro businesses, as well as our maker, which is our artisans and our artist community, our self-employed residents and entrepreneurs, our startups and incubators, along with the newer, larger employees. We're trying to attack to set a marketplace such as the life sciences and tech economy and national businesses really coming mostly to our transformational areas. But I think we can agree our economic diversity doesn't just fuel our city, it truly defines us. Somerville is known for its local independent businesses, again, our artists, our makers and artisans and more. And at the same time, their existence and productivity supports the community goals and values that truly make up our identity and who we are, our creativity, our diversity, our originality. Through them, we achieve goals like walkability, sustainability, diversity, and community. And through them, we also grow the jobs and support the economy we're trying to create. Big companies often get the headlines, but the bulk of the local community is made up of the first four groups on this slide, which is our small, our creative, and independent businesses, and our entrepreneurs, our self-starters, some who are here tonight. So I'm going to speak specifically about what we're doing to ensure that they not only stay strong, but they continue to thrive and expand and participate in a changing economy. So the question to keep in mind is, how does this impact any of us individually or as a community? A key part of our local ecosystem, our local economy, really aids us in reaching some of our goals, such as our sustainability goals. 1/3 of Somerville's greenhouse gas emissions, according to our most recent and only study, it comes from transportation, with really nearly 60% of that coming from passenger vehicles. So if we want to help achieve this goal of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, then we obviously need to shift trips away from motor vehicles. We need to not plan a city for cars, but for people that embrace the human scale. And one way to do that is to have nearby shops and amenities where people can frequent those services and access them here locally, not have to travel outside the city or long distances to do that, to make that the easy choice, not a choice of convenience that decides to go somewhere else. So it's easier not to drive, again, if we have, I think you'd agree, if we have small businesses in the squares and neighborhoods across the city. We can also reduce the city's carbon footprint if we support new work models or work models that require less commuting, such as entrepreneurs, some again here tonight, who work out of their homes or at local co-working spaces, which are cropping up in the city and the region. Affordability, obviously, is certainly a top priority for our community. Obviously, one driver of affordability are taxes, or challenge for affordability, whether you own or rent or have the cost of taxes or fees or anything passed down to you. So if we want to achieve the goal of keeping our residential tax rate low or decreasing over time, then what we need is obviously to shift the tax-based burden away from the residential property taxpayer onto the commercial side. And you've heard us talk about this goal over and over again, myself, the council, the city as a whole, is our long-term goal is to shift that ratio, that paradigm, to bring more commercial entities into the community, large and small, in this case small, to again take the burden of the residential property taxpayer. If we bring in more small businesses, we expand their presence in our neighborhood districts and squares, they'll help diversify our revenue stream and help alleviate the burden on the residential property taxpayer. Thriving restaurants, shops, and services also help diversify the revenue we have with meals tax and other fees and that come in with those services that bring us, again, revenues outside of the typical property tax. The other is obviously on the quality of life. I know people want to be, want to frequent neighborhoods with really active, robust sidewalks full of life and vibrancy. So, because the healthy local economy does impact our quality of life. So I hear so often that along with our diversity, there's a pride in our sense of community and our unwavering commitment to really progressive values. One thing so many of us love about living here, again, is the walkability of many of our vibrant squares, or the investments we're making to expand that walkability and that bikeability, to increase the modal opportunities in our business districts. So if we want to be happy living in Somerville, one thing we can certainly do is help increase expand the vibrancy of our neighborhoods by attracting more businesses, more diverse small businesses to add to the vibrancy and really the life and energy along the sidewalks and street life in our central business districts, in our neighborhood business districts. So in turn, by working to draw customers from our local businesses into those districts, what they do in turn for us is the businesses provide the services and amenities and a sense of community, and there's an investment coming back of people that frequent there, whether it's from the small businesses or the nonprofits there, and again, it recycles, and again, impacts in a positive way. We've seen this from our happiness surveys, that people feel that sense of community, that connectivity. But there are pressures, which means we have to remain really vigilant and focused. Globally, we are facing climate change, a growing population. The culture of convenience is also including a shift to an online economy. Retail, as we know it, has been turned upside down. Locally in Somerville, we have changes coming from new development that we need to manage. We have construction impacts, as we all know, that we need to mitigate. And we're part of, again, an international population shift to the urban core that impacts not just residential property, but also commercial rents. Right now, 54% of the world's population lives in city regions like the Metro Boston region. By 2050, that will increase to 75%. And here in the U.S., we are still in the depths of the greatest population shift or demographic shift since the mid-50s. People want to live in the urban centers, connected to more public transportation, even if the T doesn't work, better than being out in the suburbs where they don't have really that service, to lifestyle, to culture, where there's a sense of community. On top of that, our businesses also face some specific challenges. They face competition still, even though retail is trying to redefine itself, understand what it is, that competition from big box stores and chains. They face staffing challenges and barriers to startup capital. They may need, for example, information and training, and they have to also navigate red tape locally at the state level because of certain license requirements and regulations. Some face equity issues that create barriers to entry for minority and other business owners. We're not immune to that, and as I mentioned, obviously the construction and real estate, including rents, can present very impactful challenges as well. So we are working as an administration daily to focus on getting numbers members of our local economy through these immediate challenges and building resiliency and building adaptability for a stronger future. But the challenge is that for us in taking this on is that every business is different and their needs are varying as well. And what we've certainly discovered is, and it should be no surprise, the old model of economic development wasn't addressing current challenges that small, micro, alternative, and startup businesses face. So we started thinking creatively about how to address really their modern economic, and our collective modern economic development needs. So here's some really powerful data which speaks to why we needed to up our game. The odds are against really the motivated people who dare to open their own businesses. And what this data shows is that half of the small businesses nationally fail within 5 years, and 2/3 fail within 10. And there are many variables that contribute to that success or failure. Just as our economy is diverse, our solutions, it speaks to the need that our solutions and support system must be adapted and updated to fit the needs that come up. And I'm not going to really list all the ways we are working to counter these challenges, because there are many, but let me at least give you a window into three broad examples of what our alternative economic development and approach looks like really in action. So starting with a closer look at some of the ways that we connect customers, connect people to small local businesses while also supporting our creative economy. So Somerville, as we know, one of the things we're proud of is part of our creativity, originality. We're known for our love and for our strengths of the arts. But when the Arts Council hosts something like a fun festival, like the Fluff Festival or Art Beat or Ignite, it's not just a great way for many of us to spend a Saturday. For me, I like that a lot. It's also an immensely effective way to support our squares and to support our local businesses. So we had some research done, and an independent research found that for every $1 we spend here on festivals, on murals, on cultural events, what we see is a return of $4.40 in economic impacts. I mean, first, there are the direct benefits to artists to make is that we hire and provide vending opportunities to, as well as the money the Arts Council pays for supplies like tents, for promotion like posters. Then some of those dollars get spent again locally. And then finally, we draw crowds in, so those crowds will visit local shops. No surprise, we had over 20,000 people here for Fluff. They'll buy food, they'll buy art, etc. While all festivals visitors notice all the visitors who come to our festivals and events, they notice the restaurants, they notice the vendors and services, I guess I mentioned earlier, even the nonprofits, and they'll also tend to return later. So this speaks to the kind of placemaking that we found and research supports, builds that customer base and expands it over time as well. But when the same research firm looked just, for example, at the economic impacts of Arts Union, which we launched here about 15 years ago, but about a decade ago they looked back at Arts Union and its impacts. The Arts Series was found to be, for example, injected between roughly $200,000 to $350,000 annually just into Union Square. Now that's we find a really good return on investment. It's not just supporting something we value in the community, but economically supporting our local and small businesses. And I'll just point to, even during the deepest of the greatest recession we came out of, it was those small creative businesses that really held us firm and stable during very difficult times and times of austerity. We were able to move forward, albeit incrementally. I look back at event spending by the Arts Council really over the past 5 fiscal years. We can see if we multiply this conservatively by 4, not the 4.4 I just mentioned, the research research identified shows that our citywide culture and arts events have injected approximately more than $3 million over 5 years right into our local alternative
economies as well as our small businesses. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's money for artists, it's money for performers. Your favorite restaurant on the corner, the convenience store we frequent, and more. But I do want to also come back to placemaking, because this idea of placemaking is important. When people stick around, I think about how we all act. We stick around to places that make us feel comfortable, like out here. It's not just the activity that placemaking unlocks, it's the social equity, it's the connectivity to community. So we strive to make them comfortable with activity, outdoor furniture, appealing parks and other open spaces and special events. And we want to measure this, what our success is. A good example is at Kenny Park, and that's the park when we were about to enter Davis Square on your left. So after we fixed, for example, the water feature and added just movable chairs, we saw, we studied this, we measured it, 40% more people just sitting in the park. We saw more parents watching their kids in the splash park by day, even more couples on dinner dates in the evening, or friends just hanging out, being connected. And that in turn helps support the businesses in the square. It adds to that vibrancy, adds the energy, impacts our quality of life in a very positive way. But like cultural events, studies have found that when communities improve pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, they gain net new businesses. Private investment increases and customers spend more. Just think about it. More than 80% of the motor vehicle traffic that comes through Somerville is cut-through traffic, about 83%. 82%. They're not going to Union or Davis Square. They're going somewhere else. They don't add anything to our community other than to our carbon footprint. Because that's because when you drive, people are just speeding by, right? But pedestrians and cyclists, they stop. They frequent, they engage, they notice the businesses, and they become customers. Dedicated bus lanes, like the one we just installed on Broadway, are also part of this. They increase ridership. So you get more people walking past businesses. It's really common sense and practical. They walk to and from the bus stops. Here's a good data set, this example from Portland, Oregon. It shows that cyclists and pedestrians there spent what they spent per month because they stop more often at local business. And you can see those who biked with an infrastructure that enhanced biking, those who walked with an infrastructure that expanded walkability are at the top of the list. The data proves the point. It is impactful. The second window into our efforts is really a look at how we're addressing equity and for many businesses, the barriers to entry into the economy that we're planning, economy now and economy in the future. All of you, I give credit to anybody who's opened a business or tried to do it. It takes a lot of work, and there are some barriers to entry that keep people locked out for even taking that risk, chasing a dream. So I already mentioned some, like not having access to capital or to funds to cover overhead and the startup costs, or having to figure out all the red and bureaucratic steps and red tape. But there may also be language barriers. It may be hard finding the right space and being able to afford it. Or having all the necessary skills and training to handle all parts of the business really requires access to education or sort of on-the-job training. And we see how this is playing out for some groups here in Somerville via Census Data. The majority of businesses here are male-owned in Somerville. And minorities only own about 18% of the business in Somerville. So it's important. If we want to remain an integrated, diverse community, it's not just, there's many things we need to take on. Equity to services, equity in our schools, equity to housing, real housing opportunities, equity to truly have options and opportunity to participate in the economy. Some of these barriers are long-standing and they're systemic. For example, here, as you can see, a study of wealth in Boston found that white households in the area had a median net worth of nearly $250,000, while African American households had a median net worth of $8. So we have to ask ourselves, what kind of impact does or can this have on us? Well, for one, look at how people typically fund a small business startup. Many use credit cards or home equity. You can see how this would be a challenge for low-income or minority entrepreneurs. That's one reason we made equity a key qualifier for, and I want to thank Council Scott, the entire City Council. We made this a key qualifier for our recreational marijuana licensing. We looked at who had been most impacted by really the field or war on drugs, and we wanted to make sure we approached this with the lens that those who suffered most from it in our community had a true opportunity to participate and thrive and grow in that economy. Nibble is one attempt also at lowering the barriers specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs. Immigrants are twice as likely to start a business as US-born residents, but really can run into roadblocks around things, again, like language barriers, again, startup costs, and getting the proper permits and certifications. The Arts Council's Nibble program helps immigrant entrepreneurs navigate that red tape. They offer support in other languages and help them organize low overhead events, sort of like pop-ups and vending at festivals. So these are great examples. These are two permanent businesses that have grown out of the Nibble program. Las Carolinas, you probably saw them, you've seen at the many festivals, and Nibble Kitchen at Bow Market with they have an ADA compliant commercial kitchen. So far, chefs and cooks from 13 different countries have really benefited from this program. So this is model economic development. This model of economic development uses the other industries at their one-stop shopping events. So Economic Development Division hosts these events. And we learn from other industries where business owners can come and they can talk to other relevant city departments to get help with permits and licenses, get help in other languages, and learn best practices. Sometimes lowering the barriers to entry means looking at our own rules, regulatory rules here in Somerville, permitting rules, so forth, and even at the state, and updating them to be in sync with current businesses. There are two good examples of this. One of the liquor licenses laws, which in Massachusetts, if you don't know, it's still in the books that you are subject to a per capita formula. So the amount of liquor licenses in your city are distributed by the amount of people per capita. So they're going to tell you how many people are allowed to access liquor licenses at Beacon Hill. Somerville saw that the impact of this was having a negative impact on our local economy and the ability of people to enter market. So think about Boston, for example. Boston, let me explain this briefly. If you have a liquor license, you don't own it in the old liquor licenses. You have the right and the privileges of possessing it. Under the old system, and still in the books of many cities and towns, if I was going to sell my business or stop doing my business, I had a liquor license, I could sell it to you, even though I don't own it, sell the right to possess it, or the privilege of possessing it, at fair market value. So what's happening in places like Boston? If you want to do that in Boston, it's going to cost you $475,000 for that license. So imagine, you're low income, you're an entrepreneur, you're a new starter, you want to invest your money in your concept and you want to launch and you're going to spend several $100,000 for a license. In Somerville, that price from the mid-90s up until the mid-2000s rose from $40,000 to almost $200,000. We saw this false marketplace as a barrier to entry, so we moved to expand more license offerings in Somerville, to change our local regulations that you could not transfer at fair market value, and you would only have to pay a nominal fee, and you would give it back if you were done, and we've expanded the amount of licenses at our disposal for new businesses. And what we have seen is great impact, is we also made it a priority that the places, the districts in Somerville that did not have them, like Union Square at the time, Beacon Street area, East Somerville, Winter Hill, were our first priority, and we're seeing great equity, great opportunity. More immigrant businesses, especially in places like East Broadway, have been able to participate, and that can be the difference of up to 20% more revenue and for your business, not only ability to survive, but to thrive and expand. So that's been a great success. Also along food trucks, we've tried to focus on lowering startup costs and eliminate the need for the right real estate, and we've updated our regulations, working with the council allow them to operate. Food trucks is a great opportunity for people to launch their business concept in the restaurant and food industry. Some of the food trucks are from established restaurants who sort of spreading their concept other places. Other, they launch from a food truck service into a more brick and mortar establishment. So those are two examples of we're trying to break the barrier to entry and diversify opportunities for people who may not been able to participate in the past. But our economic development efforts need to keep up again with how also people are working. And the way people work has certainly changed, and we're looking for ways to support, not only understand that, but to support that. There are about 5.6 million small and micro businesses in the United States. Almost all have fewer than 100 employees, and 89% have fewer than 20 employees. So these small shops still need office, lab, make a manufacturing space, but might not want or be able to afford their own space. So we look at supporting co-working and incubator spaces where those companies can launch, they can begin, as well as help them find new spaces in Somerville as they reach the next level of maturation and they want to grow and expand. Some good examples of this are places like Greentown Labs. And everybody knows what Greentown Labs is, right on Somerville Lodge. It is now the largest clean tech climate solution incubator in North America, and soon it will be the world. There are now a total of 120 businesses who have used that space, which they started several years ago with 25 in Somerville. Some of them, like L3, Voxel 8, Right Hand Robotics, have grown into larger places. And some of Right Hand Robotics is currently in Union Square, the old post office. And we want to see them stay in Somerville. They continue to grow and expand. Greentown businesses have also created more than 900 jobs. And that didn't happen by chance. What we did is not only help to recruit them here, we used a fund that we established called the I-Fund, the Innovation Fund, gave them a loan to help launch with the return of creating job opportunities for local residents. They've more than met that obligation, and they're a true success story. They are now internationally, globally renowned, and not just as a successful business, but really on the front of leading ideas to take on the challenge of climate change. The other is Artisans Assignment. We've similarly worked with to help them out, as we did with Greentown. An artisan's office, really an alternative workspace in Somerville that has tremendous economic impact. They're one of the world's largest maker spaces, and we've calculated that they've had a total of $30 million in local economic impact since their founding. That's pretty impressive. So what we did to support them was locate and help them locate and assign a lease to remain in Somerville. Their business model has been evolving and changing rapidly. Over time, we've worked again on various programs and partnerships with artisans and with their individual members. We've donated used Somerville High School machining equipment to them and for the full maker economy. And not just that, we included provisions in the zoning overhaul that the council is considering that would establish their current location and others as fabrication spaces. One thing to understand is how this economy is launching, why they are here, and what are the type of spaces that will enable that collaborative creativity and launch their innovation. But we're also working to draw and support other new ways of working. We looked at our own regulations for home-based businesses, and we've changed those so it's easier for people to work at home. We've also adopted artist and, again, in the zoning, fabrication spaces for artist and maker-friendly zoning, and the Economic Development Division has expanded their programs beyond what has been a traditional focus in the past on more brick-and-mortar programs. Example, like storefront improvement, getting away from that and understanding how we help this new economy expand and grow. So we offer an active entrepreneur network where what we've seen is small businesses and self-employed people can get together, they can collaborate and network, they can share best practices, and between 75 to 80% of those businesses are women and or are minority owned. So you've heard about some of the things the city is doing to support small businesses and administration. We're excited, but it's also worth pointing out that you and I, we individually as consumers, have an immense power here and an opportunity to have impact. You know the adage, when you spend locally, you are actually investing locally, and in this case, in Somerville. When you shop locally, a greater percentage stays local and continues to help our community. Businesses hire people in the community. A lot of times they're sponsoring many community organizations, events from youth sports team to other nonprofits and social service agencies. And they're getting the supplies locally, and they're bringing other small businesses to remodel and design their website. This chart, what it shows is that when you shop at a chain retailer, an estimated 13.6% of your dollars spent recirculates back into the local economy. But when you and I shop at an independent local retailer, nearly half of those dollars funnel back into our communities as owners and staff also spend locally. And for restaurants, the impact of choosing local over chain is even greater. And one of the things we're excited about when I talked about the liquor licensing, we believe there is a direct correlation of more locally, independently run restaurants, and many of them are the best of Boston because of that opportunity to obtain that important service through the liquor license here. But for every $100 we spend at a locally owned restaurant, $65 at least will stay in our community versus just $35 if we go to a chain restaurant. So again, our local businesses and our entrepreneurs, they do face challenges. We know them, they're pretty clear, and I want you to know that we're certainly working on all fronts as an administration, as a community, to confront them. But one positive indicator is that the number of Somerville business does continue to grow each year. So just from 2012 to 2018, the number of new businesses increased roughly 23%, and that's net new 489 businesses. And most of these, not all, but most of these are small micro businesses with less than 5 employees, including the owner. But cumulatively, they are the economic engine supporting who we are in Somerville, who we want to be, and that's really exciting. But to conclude, I want to be clear as well that this is not a spectator sport. As our intrepid entrepreneurs, self-employed residents, artists, makers, and artisans and small business owners work to succeed, and as the city works hard to support them, again, we too have an important role to play, as I mentioned. So it's up to us to support those local businesses. So let's all remember that when we support our local businesses, we're supporting the great social project in the city we call Somerville. So that's just a little bit of flavor, some information for all of us to think about a local economy and data. I want to take a couple of questions, but I'm not going to go anywhere. I'll be right here to answer this or anything else you want to talk about. So if anybody has a couple of questions on the slides I presented? Yes? No, it's a good point, though. Yeah. Were you at Ward 6 last night? Because we used those same words last night in Ward 6. Because when we were talking about Davis Square, people still say, what we like about Davis Square, because it reminds us of what Harvard Square used to be, when it was still Harvard Square. And we're going through some important questions as a community, collectively, in Davis Square. How do we create in Davis Square, and it's relevant to your question about Union Square, how do we support local businesses? One, the infrastructure work is critical, expanding the modal options beyond cars. We can't have congestions in our squares and our roads if we want to help businesses. You saw the data. Two, the city towards supportive programs of helping small micro businesses and other businesses launch is important. But moving forward in the future, that economy at Union Square, what's going to benefit them greatly is daytime upper story tenancy. This is a big challenge in Davis Square. My concern for Davis Square is a lot of the establishments that people have come to love and frequent are in jeopardy in terms of their survival. Because if you have, I go to Davis, I eat 90% of my meals and shop in Somerville because it's some of the best restaurants around. But in Davis, most places, or many places, don't even open for lunch Monday through Thursday. Some don't open for dinner on Monday or Tuesday. And for many, I'm just using the restaurants as an example, but it applies to retail as well. Many, the bulk of their revenue comes on Thursday, Friday, Saturday evening, or weekends. That can only sustain so long if your rent at cost per square foot is going up. And what we need to think about Davis, and we've already thought about Union, this started several years ago, is how do we create that vibrant neighborhood? How do we create daytime upper story tenancy, and the local businesses can participate in that? I think that's the greatest thing we can do here, as well as navigating through these other challenges we mentioned. There are new businesses who want to launch. What are the challenges around that? We talked about it, but even during this change, there's disruption because of infrastructure improvements, so that we can get through that. But over the long term, we need people not leaving the city every day. I mentioned the Great Recession earlier. That during the Great Recession between 2008 2010, there was a presidential election going on. President Obama was running for re-election. He was challenged. And the big question at that time, it's strange that this is a question then during the presidential election, and this one will be a whole host of other issues, but that one, will the unemployment rate hit 8%? Because over history, no president running for re-election was ever re-elected if unemployment reached 8%. Well, in Somerville, does anyone take a guess of what the unemployment rate was then, between 2000, during that time? 3.7%. Problem was, and it still is to an extent, 85% of the people who had a job were leaving the city every day. They're not here, recycling back into the economy. And creating that environment, setting the table for that, in Union, I think that's the advantage there. The community, I want to applaud them, the neighborhood council, all the stakeholders engaged in the recent community benefits agreement. They had all those values and their compass and their focus as they negotiated that. So I'm really confident about the opportunities and success for those businesses to survive and thrive. We just need to make sure new businesses have a chance to launch there as well. And I know Jessica Eshelman is there from Union Square Main Street. It's a focus of hers and her group. Yes? The first, repeat that? For heights? Yeah, I think it's going to vary, depending on where we are in the critical. And no, I agree. We don't. You certainly don't want to be doing 12 stories and everywhere in the middle of a district. I would also invite us to look back at pictures from. There's a great historic picture of I think it was 1918 in the middle of the square. The heights and the densities are greater than they are now, when Union Square was a transit hub and a thriving local business district. So I really believe the community has been very thoughtful of the Union Square neighborhood plan, adopting the zoning, taking those considerations in mind. But we need to have businesses operating in the square during the day, and we need to have people working here. There are great returns on our economy, our quality of life, to supporting our families if we can work locally, and those new jobs we're bringing to Somerville. So I think that's the difference between Union and Davis. Union saw that example in Davis in 2009, going back 10 years ago, and said, take that zoning that's in Davis and get rid of it. We want to see it again. And thinking about how do we, and the community's worked really hard over the last several years to bring us to the point we're at. I can take one more, and then I'm going to step back, to dominate all the time, but I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
So we've had 4 pedestrian deaths in Somerville in 2019 between the dedicated walk cycles, fast traffic, putting cut-through traffic into residential neighborhoods driving really fast, between all the disruption and construction. Are those truly dangerous to be pedestrian in Somerville? And as a parent, I'm not that comfortable letting my child who really should be able to walk around the city on his own. A lot of parents feel the same way. I'm sure almost everybody in this room could say, there's probably a spot where someone's going to get hurt eventually. What are you doing? What is the police department doing? Like specific steps and these steps. What's being done to make it safer?
So thank you for the question. I'll just, for those in the back who can't hear, in short, what's being done, given there's been some tragic pedestrian, not accidents, but crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists, including some hit and runs where people have died. I know the police department's going to talk recently, but I want to just open up. There's several things we're doing. One, we are truly pursuing our goals of Vision Zero, and it's not going to be easy. We are in the most, not just Somerville, but the metro region is now the most congested traffic region in the United States. You can see that every day, and it is frustrating. And on top of that, you have distracted driving, you have speed. One, long term, we need to continue to think about not planning a city for cars. We need to think about making major investments, and we will, in protected bike lanes and giving roads their diet, and priority bus lanes. I'll use an example. I mean, this is hard because it's changed. A lot of the community, there'll be a lot of pushback, for example, the priority bus lane up at Broadway. But what we've seen even shortly, in a short time, speed has gone down. Pedestrians on Broadway went the hill, instead of crossing 4 lanes of traffic to get one side or the other, it's now 2 lanes of traffic because you have that priority bus lane. So one, we need to hold true to not just saying we have the visions here, but what are the policies, the planning and investments going to be long-term, the education and enforcement, and the police department talk a little about that. Secondly, we need to act not just locally, but regionally. If we want people to get out of their cars and take public transportation, we need congestion on our roads, then we need to make sure our transit system across the region is working efficiently, it's on time, it's working properly. That includes buses. Now, we might not control the T, but we do control our roadways in Somerville, so doing more what we did on Prospect, Broadway, priority bus lanes is important as well. And again, making major investments, what we're going to be doing in pedestrian safety, traffic mitigation. And it's going to be a lot of enforcement on that as well, we understand. So yeah, those, and the areas of Mystic Ave and the roadways we don't control is to allocate passionately, which we are, and work collaboratively with our state partners and MassDOT for them to make the investments. I live in that neighborhood. I live in 10 Hills. And for the folks living in Mystic and one of our environmental justice communities, to cross Mystic Avenue, which is a highway on a grade level, to go over to Blessing the Bay Boathouse, and Brad Ross's here at Transportation and Infrastructure, it is taking the life in our hands. It is scary to watch. But there are a lot of other variables on top of this too. Distracted driving is almost always involved in one of these crashes, or speed. So we need to continue to understand as we debate and why we need to make these investments to not make the car king in Somerville, to plan a city for people, skinning down the roads, that one, it's about safety of our community. It's about our public health, to relieve congestion, all right, with all the particulates in the air that we're breathing and sucking. It's about long-term goals tying that to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and Somerville, reducing our carbon footprint. So there are short-term things we need to do now, which we are in enforcement, which we're looking at these priority intersections. It has to be a long-term, sustained effort. So it's not going to change on a dime, because 83% of the cars that come through Somerville still are not originating from our community. They are coming from other areas. Yes, the question is, has the police department been charged to do more enforcement? Yes, they have, and I know Captain Dunn is going to speak to that as part of his presentation. There have been other things we've tried to do, and we need to think about at statewide. And there are questions we have to rise. For example, we cannot at any one time deploy every officer in every intersection of need in Somerville. One of the things we supported was red light enforcement, the cameras at intersections. That was not supported at the state level. Now, people have concerns, but we believe we can work with our partner, the ACLU. We can protect our rights, and it's our right to still protect our community, because Somerville, again, with the enormous amount of traffic that comes through our city, even with the Green Line that takes 25,000 cars per day up the road, we have so many intersections, people cutting through our city to try to get to Cleveland and other parts of Boston. We still don't have enough folks. We can hire another 100 officers. We still won't have enough to get an intersection every time of day. So short term, we need to do intense enforcement education now, continue to do the strategic investments. Long term, the planning is on its way, and we need to play a role regionally on this, because it's not going to turn on a dime. I share your concern. I really do. I see it every day. You know, we're going to get there, but it's going to be a long term. I'm going to be honest. Am I passing? I'm going to be around for other questions. Thank you for that. Is it Taylor who am I handing off to? Oh. Rodents is the way. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Georgiana Silvera, as you can see on this slide. I'm the city's environmental health coordinator, and I work on rodent control policy and education in the Health and Human Services Department. And I've been with the city since January, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the rodent activity study that our department performed in East Somerville this past spring. And so what we were trying to do with this study was just to get a quantitative measurement of rat activity in this area of Somerville and sort of figure out what environmental factors are most sort of strongly correlated with higher levels of activity, because the best way to control rodents in the long term is to remove the resources that they're using in the city to survive, namely food, water, and harborage. And so we had sort of done this first step study to try to start getting a sense of what things are sort of maybe contributing to rodent activity in Somerville, and what can the city then do to try to decrease or remove rodents' access to these sources. So it worked. And so what we did was, from April 29th to May 17th, we set out a total of 295 traps with permission from 134 privately owned properties in this area, highlighted on the map here. If you can't really tell, it's sort of between Broadway and Washington, and then from McGrath kind of to the end of the city. So it was about a quarter square mile area in which we set out these traps for 3 weeks, checked them every other day, and used the results from the traps as a measurement of activity. And so throughout the 3 weeks, we caught a total of 90 individual rats at 31 of the 134 properties that we trapped on. We then used the activity data that we found to generate this cool map. And so the sort of relative areas of higher activity are shown in red, relative areas of lower activity are shown in blue. And this was created sort of based on the known points where we actually trapped and measured activity. The program we used kind of estimates out across the area to show the higher and lower levels of activity. And this map is very cool because it demonstrates the high amounts of variability that you see sort of with rat activity in an urban setting. They don't travel very far from their burrows to their food sources. And so different blocks that are right next to each other, even different properties, have very different levels of activity depending on what resources are kind of available in that area. And so then based on this kind of activity that we measured, I compared it to a number of environmental factors, including things like businesses with food service licenses, locations of dumpsters, construction permits issued by the Inspectional Services Department, kind of a variety of things, whatever we can kind of get our hands on to figure out what might be contributing the most to rodent activity in the area. And we sort of had three main findings that we're sort of using to base our next steps based on this study. We found higher activity both around properties with 2 or more trash violations. They were issued a ticket because they violated the city's trash storage ordinances. So 2 or more violations since the beginning of the year, so from January to May. As well as what we suspect to be active construction sites, though it's a little bit hard to tell based on the way permits are issued and things like that. We found higher activity around sites that had permits issued recently, and so we sort of suspect that it's around active construction sites. And we also, sort of against what we had hypothesized, didn't really find lower activity around areas that were recently treated through the city's residential baiting program. And so while we didn't really catch a lot of rats directly on properties that had the program, the ones in the area weren't really feeling the effects from that program. And so I've sort of laid out 4 kind of next steps that we're trying to implement based on these findings, including increased education about trash ordinances and trash storage best practices, not only for property owners, but also for the tenants who are only going to be here for 8 months coming in and out of the city, making sure that they're sort of a focus of the education campaigns that we run. I'm also in the process of working with the Inspectional Services Department on more strict and effective requirements for rodent extermination for building permits that are issued. And I also, we're working on trying to increase participation in the city's baiting program, which might seem a little counterintuitive because we don't want to increase the amount of poisons that are being placed out in the city. However, the way that we're sort of doing it right now, just sort of parcel by parcel, one property at a time, isn't effectively impacting the population. And so if we're able to sort of at one time treat a whole block at once, you're going to see a much quicker, more effective, and long-term decrease in the activity that we're seeing, coupled with control of the environmental sort of factors that we're seeing. We're also in the process of developing some new, more targeted studies in order to sort of better understand and develop out the results that we got from this program, including looking at how the number of units on a property may affect rat activity, the type of trash storage on the property, and sort of more strictly defining how construction and demolition may be affecting the rodent activity that we're seeing in the city. And so I will take a couple of questions now. I ask that you sort of limit them either to questions about the study or questions sort of in general about the city's rodent control policy. But if you do have specific concerns about your property or your neighborhood or things like that, I'll be hanging around afterwards, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about what you and your neighbors and your community can be doing to try to decrease rat activity. Yeah, that's a great question, and does kind of speak to the limits of a study like this, where it's like we can't map every wrapper that's thrown on the ground or every sort of anything like that. Unfortunately, I did my best to try to gather data that might encompass that, including places with a food license as well as the city trash receptacles that we have mapped. But yeah, it's not sort of something that's exhaustive and not going to sort of get to every aspect, but we kind of did our best based on what data is available, what records are available, things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, possibly, and yeah, the sort of commercial areas too. But yeah, great point and great sort of acknowledgement of the limitations of this type of work and study. Great, yeah, absolutely a great point. Thank you so much. Okay, if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to hand it off to Captain Donovan, but once again, I'll be hanging around afterwards, so please come and talk to me.
I'm hoping the order of presentations is on importance. Chief Bree was nice enough to mention that the police department is coming after the road presentation tonight. Chief Fallon sends his regards. He is before the legislative committee tonight at the City Hall, and so he sent me instead. I'm Jim Donovan. I'm a captain of the police department, and I'm in charge of the patrol division. So the men and women you see in marked vehicles, your neighborhood police officers, all eventually report to me in some manner, shape, or form. Lieutenant Sheehan's here tonight. He's the commander for the shift tonight, and it's nice to stop in for the presentation or to watch me. So our first slide today is a crime slide, and as you'll see, index crimes have decreased 2% over 1 year and 3% over 2 years. I was reading this slide today while my son was, when I picked up my kids at school, and I thought, like, we use these terms index crime, and we all know what they mean in law enforcement, and I was wondering, like, how many people actually know what index crimes are? Like crime analysts in the room. So index crimes are crimes the FBI deems important. There are 8 crimes, and they are, I actually wrote them down. They're murder, sexual assaults, robberies, aggravated assaults, and then our property crimes, arson, burglary, larceny, theft, and motor vehicle theft. So those are the ones that we report to the FBI, and the FBI reports back to us. It's how we compare ourselves to other cities, other communities, other states, et cetera, and so forth. As for Ward 2, our index crimes in Ward 2 decreased by 11% over 1 year and increased 2% over 2 years. As far as violent crimes go, violent crime decreased 5% over 1 year and 9% over 2 years. As you'll see, we broke them down on the chart, and as you can see, bike thefts kind of dominate, and this kind of leads into our next slide. We have seen an uptick in bike thefts, and more people are cycling in Somerville. I think we all know that. We see them cycling on Beacon Street, Somerville Ave. And it's some tips for the residents. One, always lock your bike to a fixed object. Did anyone see the news recently? I think it was at Davis Square at the T station. Someone locked their bike to a bike rack and then picked it up and put the chain underneath the bike rack. So the bike rack wasn't secured. The next day, the MBTA secured that bike rack, but it goes to the point is secure to a fixed object, even if it's stored inside a garage or a shed. Be wary of certain locks. Cable locks are easily cut. We do see that sometimes. We did see an increase in that in Davis Square, and I'll talk about our efforts to reduce that after. Never lock your bike to a wooden post. It can be broken, obviously. Take indoors overnight if you can, if possible. If not, store somewhere with low street visibility, a backyard, a porch, etc., and so forth, but always locked. And keep a file of the bike, serial numbers and photos. As far as our efforts, we did recognize there was an increase in bike thefts, particularly in Ward 6, but across the city. And what we did was we assigned one sergeant in our gang unit, actually. We assigned him in detectives with a number of detectives. And they said, I could go on and on what they've been doing. We are on camera, so I don't want to give up any secrets. But surveillance and some other methods we've been using to identify bike theft. And we recently did make an arrest. It wasn't a bike theft related arrest, but it was one of the suspects we thought were doing the bike thefts. So we're expecting to see our bike thefts decrease over the next 30 days. We'll be checking up on that as well. Obviously we analyze temporal and geographical patterns to appropriately assign our resources. Neighborhood police officers and area cars were deployed based on the data we got from our theft data. Just to hit on the data we get, I always encourage at these meetings to tell people, report everything. Report your bike thefts. If your neighbor tells you, hey, geez, my bike was stolen, first thing you should ask them, did you report it to the police? We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know where all these thefts are occurring. We need the input. We need the input from the community to get this data so we can allocate our resources properly. And the last part there is increased residents' awareness of crime prevention methods, which is what we're doing here tonight. Second slide there. Chief Fallon's constantly telling us, he's constantly preaching. I wrote down his quote here. Make your first encounter a positive one. We recognize in law enforcement we need to create a better image. We recognize that. And how do we do that? We can change the perception of law enforcement. Well, make your first encounter a positive one. I tell my officers every day, we're service providers. We don't make anything. We don't make bicycles. We don't make faucets. We don't make phones. We provide a service. And you're our clients. How can we provide a better service? Well, community engagement. We talked about, Chief Fallon, like I said, talks about have that first encounter be a positive one. We recognize that who we have the most impact on, it's our youth. But start with them first. And, in that said, this summer Chief Fallon put together a basketball clinic for the youth in Somerville. It was SPD officers, ran a clinic for ages 10 to 19 every Tuesday and Thursday. It started July 16th and ran through the 29th. Initially, it was run at the Healy School, but I think because of the hot weather, we moved it here. Very, very well attended. And I realized through this that one of our officers, Officer Beckford, actually played basketball in college. Andy holds the record for the most shots blocked in Somerville High School. He brags about that. We also did our Junior Police Academy for the second summer. Extremely, extremely popular. We held two one-week academies. We had a total of 61 graduates, ages 11 to 14. The activities included a presentation by District Attorney Marion Ryan, the National Guard Fitness Challenge, CPR training, Catawba provided first aid training. We did a canine presentation with our canine, And it was a lot of team building, physical fitness. And what's interesting is when the first day they arrive, it's treated like a police academy. So we have them in attention. We've got one of our officers who was a former Marine. He comes out, all spit polished and shine, and a little bit intimidating, I think, but the kids love it. We have a ton of return youth in the academy. Last time we were here, this time last year, I think we were here saying we had a certification. We're now an accredited police department. Unbelievable achievement. There are very few police departments in the state of Massachusetts that have their accreditation. Many of these departments, I looked at the list today before coming here, very small departments, a lot of universities. I think Brookline may be accredited, and there aren't many other big accredited departments. And what it is the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission comes through and looks at all our policies, our procedures, our infrastructure, our facilities, and makes sure that we're using best practices. Chief Fallon likes to say the gold standard. And I do laugh, but it's true. It is the gold standard. It's the best practices in law enforcement recognized by the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission. I looked at the picture and I realized how freakishly tall I am. I didn't realize that until you see the picture. I should have done this a little more taller than Chief. We always end our slides with this. We do have 2 certified clinicians working out of our police department, helping people with mental illness, helping people with addiction. We also have addiction coaches. These are all the services some of the services they provide, other services that are available to them. Just to kind of hit on that a little bit, the people that work in that unit work hand in hand with our officers. So when our officers respond to a call, instead of immediately going for an arrest, they're looking and saying, okay, there's a mental health issue here. How can we help them? We connect them with the people of the core program in the Somerville Police Department, and they connect them with resources. They work hand in hand with us every day. They work in the lobby of the police station. They know every police officer's name. We know them. And someone at the last meeting, the Ward 6 meeting, asked if we do co-response, which is we send out a mental health worker with our officers on the road. And it's something we are looking at, and we'll probably do it by the time we come back in next year. I'll take a few questions, and I will be here to answer questions as well. Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, because the mayor had asked me to speak about that, and I got caught up in my own slides. The gentleman asked about pedestrian safety. We are out there. We're out there, but it's enforcement, it's infrastructure. We work with Brad Ross and his people constantly, almost too much. Brad's emailing me, every day. We work together. He identifies areas, they do the infrastructure, we do the enforcement to make sure people are aware of it. We identify areas for him. We're working together right now on Curtis Street and Potter House, maybe tweak that a little bit. Brad works with us, but again, we can't be on every corner, and we are out there. I was telling the mayor, and he knows that the busiest department in our police department is the traffic unit, and we recently beefed it up. We added four officers on mountain bikes, get through the city quicker, looks better, and their sole duty is to do traffic enforcement. We place them everywhere, but we do need feedback. So if you want to talk to me after you've identified an intersection, I'll have someone down there. Definitely. We'll do enforcement for a few days, try to change behavior. If we identify something wrong in the infrastructure, we'll consult with Brad, maybe Brad will change something. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, I'll put on an enforcement checklist. We'll have someone there. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Do you have any information that can be shared that would teach us older drivers that train for bicycles to swing to put in place about what all the hand signals mean? I find this very confusing. They've had a couple of year impact more.
That's phenomenal input. I work with Ian's in the back row. He's on the Bicycle Commission. I work on the Safety and Security Subcommittee on the Bicycle Commission, and that's something we'll take up next meeting. That's we'll try to put it on social media, put it on the city's webpage, but something we haven't thought of. Thank you. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I'd like to actually add to that, because the street parking is low. When it reaches the beginning different than when it's bottom block.
Well, the dotted line, I think I'm right, is that at that point, a car can go safely into that lane and make a right-hand turn. That's what the dotted line is there. But on your point, we'll add that. That's we can do a pamphlet. Absolutely. Last one, and then I said I won't leave. And that's happened. I can't really speak to the training aspect of it. It's not something we would actually do. But as far as enforcement, oh, significant. And we're constantly doing bike enforcement. So my immediate supervisor, Deputy Chief Carabino, is an avid cyclist, and he writes more tickets to cyclists than anyone else in the police department. He's made more enemies among his own community than I can possibly imagine. You've probably seen him. His favorite spot is on the bridge at the end of Mossland coming down onto Beacon Street. He hides in the corner there. And all the cyclists avoid it now. He's constantly, so we are out there doing bike enforcement, we equal opportunity. If you violate the law, you violate the law. We're out there, we write a significant amount of cycling tickets as well. Absolutely. I mean, it's something, like I said, I'm on the safety committee, something can bring up as well. I mean, I love that gentleman's point about educating people on I've been a police officer 20 years. I've asked that question. I've asked, what are the sharrows about? What that green box, we don't get trained in it immediately either. We try to train in roll call, but it's a great point. We can add that to it as well. I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere, so if you have any other questions, and I'll hand it off to Brian Postaway.
Good evening. I'm Brian Postwaite, Assistant Director in the Engineering Department. I was initially thinking I might come and talk to you about our new Aquatic Recreation Department, but then I realized that's probably not that funny when you're talking about wading knee-deep in water. So, since it's not that funny, we're going to continue talking about what we're going to do about the flooding in the city. So over this past summer, we've had a lot of additional flooding, more than we've seen in the past few years. Lake Street's been one of our harder hit streets in the city, but Ward 2 in general has been hit hard, with other streets such as Perry, Kingsdale, but we're also getting flooding elsewhere in the city, in Powderhouse Boulevard, near Gilman Square, etc. So this is an issue, and we know about it, and it's a big concern for the city. It's a big concern because it is a safety and health concern. Floodwaters are not necessarily a safe place to play or walk through, but it's not just the public health of the matter, it's also our personal property can be damaged, and it can also increase combined sewer overflows into the Mystic River and the Alewife Brook. So these are serious concerns, and the city is taking them seriously. So what are the things that cause the flooding in the first place? So I'm going to go through this slide backwards because I tend to be like that. Coastal flooding is when the floods come up from the ocean And that primarily occurs around Assembly Road. That's the area in the city that's most affected by that. Something that's more common throughout the city, but primarily in the winter, is snow-related flooding. And that's when we get rain or snow melt that melts more rapidly than the snow clears away from our grates, so that the waters don't get into the storm sewers as quickly as they should. Third is the sustained rains. These are the long duration storms. These are the 10-year storms, the 100-year storms. These are the storms that happen most commonly in spring and fall. That's when we get the most volume of our water, and that's what our storm systems are primarily designed to. They're designed to accommodate these rather long but large volume storms. The challenge right now is that recently we've been receiving a lot of really short and fast storms. Storms that don't take very long, but generate a lot of rain in that very short time period. So it's the intensity that is causing us some particular challenges. One of the things that many of you have been doing to help us understand the impacts of these storms is you've been providing pictures and videos, and some of them are heartbreaking, but it's important for us to be able to compare where the flooding is occurring with the data that we can get from the USGS and other sources of how big these storms are. And one of the things that we're finding is that the storms that are dumping about 1/3 of an inch of rain within 15 minutes are the storms that are starting to cause the majority of the flooding. So when we see 1/3 of an inch in a 15-minute period, we know that that's going to be a problem. But what that allows us to do is that allows us to a certain degree project out, but also compare back to the past. And one of the things that we found is that 2019's been really bad. Most of you know this empirically, but it helps to also realize that this is something that we can show is new. We can show is different. We've had 12 storms this past year, 12 events this past year, and primarily just in the summer months. And that has been greater than any of the past 10 years. Okay, past 8 years. 9. So, I gotta be right. So we've have a lot more storms this past year. This is challenging. I hope this is abnormal. I'm not convinced it is, but I hope it's abnormal. So what are we doing about this? What does the city do? So the first thing the city do is it's an emergency. When we get calls in saying there's flooding, that's an emergency. This is not a time for planning, not a time for second guessing. It's a time for going out and solving the problem. So when you call in 311 or call into the sewer department or sometimes even the fire department, I know I've met the chief's loyal crew, is why the problem is happening. Sometimes the problem is because the water can't get in the drains fast enough. Sometimes the pipes under the street aren't flowing as well, and it's basically backing up into streets. So these are things that we are studying after the storms so that we can understand what's going on. So a couple of the things that we need to realize is that beyond the emergency, this is a systemic issue. This is something that has to do with the infrastructure that we have today and the place that we live today. So first, one thing is geography. There are parts of our city that are likely always going to be more susceptible to flooding than other places. And Ward 2 is one of the most difficult wards because of that, because Ward 2 has some of the most flat area and lowest area in the city. It will always be the last place that water's going to go before it finds its way to the rivers. And if it doesn't find its way to the river, it's going to stay here until it does. So we also need to look at how do we make sure that that water gets out. And a lot of that has to do with pipe capacity, and a lot of that has to do with how we develop, how our streets are built, how we build our new buildings, and so forth, to give space for the water to leave the city. And one of those things that we're doing right now, which a lot of people struggle with, myself included, going through Union Square, but the purpose of that is to give space to the water to leave our community. Second is more of a maintenance issue. How do we keep the infrastructure we have working as best as it can? And part of that is making sure that the pipes are clean, that there's debris cleaned out of the pipes that inhibit the flow of the water. Part of that is making sure that our catch basins are clear, and so that the water can enter into the system to begin with. So this is an element that also helps when we receive information back from the community of where our problem spots are, because rather than just reacting to flooding, we want to work ahead of the floods. We know that they're going to happen. They happen every year. So we want to start coming up with a system of cleaning the grates, cleaning the pipes in the areas that are most susceptible before the flood happens, not after. And lastly, again, I do hope that 2019 was a unique year, and that it is an anomaly, but climate change may be a real thing, and this is unlikely to go away, and it will likely get worse. So that's why infrastructure is important, maintenance is important, and smart development is important. So a couple of the things that we're doing actively in this is, so we started off, I talked to you earlier, is working on the Somerville Avenue streetscape improvements. But much of that is the utilities. It's the big culvert that we're putting into the ground. So we know that was an issue. We didn't have to study for years to figure that out. We knew that that was one of our weakest links in the city. So we began working on that right away. But we're also studying and prioritizing the city. We're studying our drainage system, and we're prioritizing the weakest links elsewhere in the city that we can address that will resolve this problem. And so we've identified a few places already. Primarily, it's Poplar Street Pump Station and Spring Hill Sewer Separation. Now, those are both sister projects to the work in Union Square right now. So the pump station is designed to pump out the system so that it gets into the river, and the Spring Hill Sewer Separation is to separate the sanitary sewer from the stormwater sewers so that we are directing the right water to the right places. Because on one hand, we want to send some water to the river, and we want to send other water to Deer Island so that everything gets treated as the proper way. But we're also doing other sewer separations elsewhere in the city, and part of the prioritization is finding the locations elsewhere in the city also. So this is a citywide effort because, frankly, it's a citywide problem. One of the elements in our work here is understanding where the flooding is. This is part of the studying and the prioritization, and so we're locating and learning how our system works and when our system doesn't. So what this is, now this is the worst case scenario. So this is when we're talking about the 100-year storm in 2070. So we're projecting more runoff, more rainfall 50 years from now. So this is the 1% chance, the 100-year storm in that time frame. And so we're seeing flooding everywhere you see blue. The darkest blue is 2 to 3 feet of water on the streets, and the lighter blue is from 6 inches to about 2 feet. So much of the community is challenged by this, especially in the worst storms. So in the meantime, it's not just about the city, it's about all of us as a community. And we need to work together to get through challenges like this. And so there's a number of things that we're working on to be able to share with the community of how you can help your own conditions and your own situations, your own properties, and also help out your neighbors and understand how to manage and mitigate these situations when they happen. So shortly you should see information coming out on all the different social media outlets and traditional media outlets of the various communications and advice that we've come up with professionals on how to mitigate flooding, but also how to manage living in flooding conditions that happen from time to time. Yes. And now I'm going to pass it over. Well, actually, if there's, we can go back. If we have a few minutes, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer, but like everybody else, I'll be here for the duration. So if you have a specific question about a specific location, that might be better served afterwards. Sir?
Yes, I'd like to ask whether the Nunziato tank project has been deemed unnecessary, put on hold, or what's happening there?
Yeah. So it hasn't been deemed unnecessary. It's still it still would be a very valuable location for storage in the city because of its location in the drainage system. It is not currently being proposed as a project, but it is part of our long-term plan. But I don't have a specific date of when it's going to be done, but it is part of the larger Spring Hill sewer separation projects. It's just not one of the priority projects or one of the first projects right now. Yes?
Well, I've lived on James Avenue for 20 years,
Yes?
and I know you have some of the Northern Line area. And so for 20 years, we've been having this. It's not just because of the library, it's
Mm-hmm.
like a central infrastructure issue that we directly see on here in the especially the black water and stormwater. But there are low-lying areas that are consistent with flood. We'd like some recognition from the city that these particularly low-lying areas that are on one street and probably over 15 feet. We would like to know that you're trying to figure out how to stop the backflow.
Mm-hmm.
And to assure us that it won't be raw sewage. We've had 7 times this summer 3 feet of water and it continues raw sewage. And it feels like a third world problem, right? It doesn't feel like a Boston or somewhere. And we have this
Mm-hmm.
problem. Also, I would like to say that I believe there's a meeting coming up on October 15th.
Yes.
We could share that with everyone what we do. Because we have complained about this issue for 20 years. 10 years ago, we found out that the water we were playing in the floods, with our kids, got sewage. It wasn't just rainwater. And we played in that water for years. Then we had a meeting with the city and we got the backflow valve to do nothing on that. That was very but we would like to be taken seriously. We've been making a lot of noise about
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. You're absolutely right. That was on my list to mention was the October 15th meeting discussing specific issues with Ward 2 flooding. And Dane Ave, Dane Street is one of those locations. Perry and Lake Street are other locations. Ward 2 has a disproportionate number of streets in this situation. Yeah. It will be located here. Yes. So I don't remember what time it is offhand. But I have it in my email. I'll check after the meeting, and we can get back to you on that.
I think it's 6:30.
Um, 6:30? Thank you, JP. So I don't disagree with any of what you have said here. The city has had a combined sewer system since the late 1800s. It has always been a combined sewer. For those of you who don't know, combined sewer is a system where both sanitary sewerage and storm sewerage is combined together, thus it being called a combined sewer. So everything is more or less combined together in the streets, in the pipes in the streets, and they drain out and eventually go into MWRA pipes that get treated at Deer Island. Everything is together. 95% of the city is that way, and it has always been that way for over 100 years. It's not necessarily a good system. It was the best that they had in the late 1800s. And I know the Infrastructure and Asset Management Director, Rich Raish, has been, I know the councilors are quite familiar with his presentations on this. We know this is nothing new. You're absolutely right. This is a combined sewerage problem. It is sanitary sewerage, it is storm sewerage, and it does back up onto streets. Part of the solution is finding out a way to separate it. That is much of our effort right now and a long-term effort. I, however, really like your ideas about doing some sort of notice to figuring out ways to clean up, and I would like to think that that's going to be more of the conversation on October 15th. And if it wasn't, I will make sure that it is part of that conversation. But to be frank, I haven't thought about that to date, so I'm not really prepared to give you good answers for that. Yeah. Honestly, there is no technological solution that the construction industry is aware of that can do something that quickly. Any sort of solution is a long-term solution. It requires a lot of construction to solve that problem in an effective way. Yeah. So yes, and that's part of the project, but that is 2 years down the line to build pump systems that are able to pump out the system. But yes, those are solutions, but they take a lot of time to construct them, to design them, and to build them. These aren't solutions because we could bring out 100 large sump pumps, but we wouldn't have anywhere to pump it to. So the challenge is not that you can't move the water, is that we don't have anywhere to move the water to. And so that's what we're working on developing, is getting the system so that we can have a way to move the water out of the community. Because otherwise we're just pumping them from one part of the community to the other part of the community.
Can you say that after a year, let's say, or 2 years, that this problem is done? That we won't flood anymore?
Can I tell you when the problem will be done?
Yes.
No.
We will not back up with lawsuits, and we will not have more floods. They're coming back from Union Square.
Okay.
Not just the water on the street.
Right.
Can the city assure us that that's what this infrastructure will solve?
So what we can say is that, you're referring to the Union Square work right now?
Yes, and along
Yeah.
Washington Street.
Okay. So the work along Washington Street right now is relining the potable water system. So the work along Washington Street, correct me if I'm wrong, but the work along Washington Street is repairing the potable water system. So it's a pressurized system that's completely separate from the sanitary system. That's a really good thing that it's separate. The work in Union Square is primarily sanitary and storm sewerage. And so that system is going to relieve, to a certain degree, the storm sewage going down Washington Street. Because it directly feeds from Somerville Avenue, it's not going to be quite as effective as it will improve the Somerville Avenue drainage, just because of the way the pipes were built and put together 100 years ago. But it will improve the situation. But will it eliminate the situation? No. No. It won't eliminate the situation, because there will still be a storm that will overcome the ability of any pipe we put in. There will always be a storm too big. The goal in improving our infrastructure system is to make that storm that will become too big less likely to happen. But we can't ever make it not likely to happen, because there will always be a storm too big. Yeah. I don't know if Cambridge has a bylaw that requires them to do that, but there are many federal and state regulations that are requiring communities to do that, and that is part of the reason why we're doing this. But it's not the only reason we're doing this. We're not separating sewers just because the federals or the state is telling us we have to. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do for our community, so that we don't have problems in our street. I actually don't know about the funding.
What's the
Yeah.
state right now?
Okay.
That's helping us. No team in the state yet. For example, Union Square, we got what is called the Mass Works grant. We had it.
There's not much of infrastructure, everything else coming from the federal government, just to clarify that. So much of what we're levying right now is funding from the state. A good example, Union Square, $13 million Mass Works grant, infrastructure grant, the largest of its kind issued in the municipality. And we're leveraging that against our other monies to fund that infrastructure project. So hopefully there'll be, as they keep talking, a massive infrastructure bill coming out of Washington. I have no idea if and when that'll happen, to what extent that will be.
So I'll be around after the meeting, happy to answer and continue this conversation. But Brad's waited long enough. I should let our idea man go.
Hi, everybody. You're a bunch of troopers. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for hanging out late. Thanks for all the things in your personal and professional lives that you're neglecting to be here. I'm going to keep my section uncharacteristically short. A couple of quick updates on the projects that my team's working on. My name is Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident, I'm a Somerville parent, and I lead the team that's responsible for parks planning, for urban forestry, and for mobility planning in the city. So a couple of quick hits, and then I'll go back to Beacon Street in a moment. So Conway Park, obviously another one of these legacy issues, and we've all been working through these processes to make sure that we understand the historic pollution in and around Conway Park, that we are complying with all state and federal regulations and bringing the park back into productive use as quickly as possible. I played soccer there many times myself, and I know how frequently these little rainstorms will result in cancellations of usable hours, sliding around in the mud bowl there. So the city tried to get ahead of this problem, and we did some investigations, some test borings, taking samples of the soil. And for folks who've been around longer than the 12 years that I've been here, you know, it was a smelting plant. There was a dye works there. The dirt way underneath Conway Park, adjacent to the historical railroads, is very contaminated. We kind of expected this, but it was even more contaminated than we expected. So we're going through all of the technical processes with the federal and state regulatory bodies to take care of the dirty dirt. That's the reason that the soccer, baseball, and football fields have been closed now for a year and a half. The good news is that with the mayor's strategy of engaging our state and federal partners, we're trying to relieve the Somerville taxpayer of a large financial burden. So we're in that process right now of working with the federal EPA and the State Department of Environmental Protection to try to make sure that this big ticket remediation project, it costs a lot of money to truck dirt off a site like Conway Park. You have to take it to specialized facilities, and the numbers add up really, really quickly. We're dealing with a bunch of legacy issues in our sewers, building our high school, the green line contribution that we never should have had to make. And as a result, it's really incumbent on us to design a strategy that relieves the local taxpayer. I'm one, you are many as well. So the process is underway, and we hope to have more specific announcements soon. And you can expect to see excavators and cleanup in the park in the springtime. City Council's been great about giving us the resources we need for the environmental engineering, and that's, again, just to assess and clean up the dirtiest dirt. If anybody travels, works, or lives in the Brick Bottom neighborhood, at ResiStat cycle after ResiStat cycle, we have heard from you and your neighbors that there's a kind of a transitioning warehouse district where some of the things that we take for granted in many of our neighborhoods about accessible sidewalks, not having trucks barreling through the neighborhoods, the folks in the Brick Bottom neighborhood are dealing with all of these things. And it's funny, Brian was talking about those legacy sewer projects, right? Actually separating the sanitary flows from the stormwater flows. One of the big things that we are trying to accomplish is ultimately send the city's stormwater to the Charles River via a big drain pipe system that the MBTA has constructed for the Green Line. And that work is coming down in Brick Bottom. There'll be big pumps that are installed there, and that's going to help relieve some of the hydraulic pressure all around the city. But because of that, it takes us a little bit longer to pave these streets, to build these sidewalks. And so, again, this is Somerville. We're an up by the bootstraps community. And so we come up with a cheap, temporary, tactical, fun way to green the neighborhood and provide pedestrians with a safer path of travel. So we just put our first movable planters in Somerville's history out on the sidewalks. And they're actually on the street. We painted the sidewalks there. This is a temporary, low-cost measure. So if you're a Brick Bottom resident trying to access the bus over by Poplar Street, you can get there. If you're trying to get to the Target for groceries or whatever, you've just got a little pathway to go to be separated from the big rig trucks that are characteristic of this industrial district. I want to do more of this. This is pretty exotic and weird stuff for traffic engineers, but for us it's actually really fun to say, look, it takes forever to rebuild sidewalks and to pave streets. Paint, signage, flexible bollards, and movable planters are great temporary tactical elements to try to make our streets safer and have people get excited about that work. So let me quickly kind of flip back to our Beacon Street slide in case folks have questions about that project as we reach the home stretch here. 2 seconds. Initial slides. Okay, so as the mayor always says, we are empathetic that you and your neighbors have dealt with 4+ years of construction on Beacon Street. And often people say, gosh, Brad, it's been 5 or it's been 10 because we built stormwater tanks by O'Sullivan's Star Market, 10, 12 years ago, Mayor? So it's been a hard slug. We're in the home stretch now. I was just out on Beacon Street a couple of hours ago, meeting with the Mass DOT and the Newport construction team earlier today. And we're imploring them to finish strong, to give us quality, to give us as much predictability as they can. The days are getting short, the temperatures are getting cold, and everybody's laser focused on finishing this project, finishing it project right, safely. So here's kind of the quick updates. Folks know that the paving of the main line was completed on Monday night. Again, thank you for all of your patience and your tolerance with traffic diversions, with noise, with light, vibration. So the main line is now paved and the quality is good. The side streets were just the last thing, and a bunch of that work happened today, and there's just one little more chunk tomorrow. So places like Eustis, Prentice, Forest, and Sacramento, where they meet Beacon, are just getting touched up. And each one of those will have a little bit of a, kind of almost like a raised crosswalk, so vehicles reaching Beacon are really going to notice it and think about these busy sidewalks, these busy bike facilities that have been constructed. The next big chunk of kind of visible work that you'll see is pavement markings. So some of the big green strip has been painted along the old Academy of Arts and Sciences. That green material will be continued to be applied all the way down to Inman Square. It's good for traffic calming, for visibility in low light conditions. So that work will happen over the next couple of weeks. Warning, if nobody remembers, the stuff stinks. I've been out there with the contractors. This is just an odoriferous material, and for a couple of days it's really rough. It's tougher in the summer than it is in these cooler temperatures, but again, we're trying to give as much information to business owners, to residents, that, again, if there's a big mobilization and, you're just coming out of surgery or something, and you're not feeling so hot, you may want to try to find family or friends for 24 hours, because the green stuff is pretty smelly. Let's see, some last signalization work. Park Street is going to be changed to exclusive, to Derek's point earlier about the signalization, so that work is coming hopefully as soon as next week. And then it's just kind of those little spots of, this brick, that sidewalk panel. There are plantings that are coming over the planter islands. And so all this stuff is happening really, really quickly. DOT is returning our phone calls. Newport is allocating its resources. But, we're in this kind of trust but verify mode right now. We know how bruised the neighborhood's sensibilities have been by this contractor and by the state process that our staff do not control. So we're not taking anything for granted. We're out on the street every day. Jesse Moose and I are taking a lot of phone calls, spending a lot of time with the project team. If you want to talk more specifics about Beacon Street, I'll be happy to. Okay. So, it's 8:30, it's 8:35. I did want to just breeze through those kind of quick project updates. If people have one or two questions, great. You have our blessing to start to move on with your evening. And of course, as the mayor said, as the chief said, we'll stick around until the last person is done asking questions or having conversations with us. Again, we appreciate your participation in this great local democracy. We know that our institutions are really at a tough moment internationally, nationally. This is where we renew our civic dialogue. This is where we renew our sense of public service and mission. So thank you for everything that you're doing to make the Somerville community great.